first FA Cup final at the new Wembley Stadium was an eagerly awaited contest between Chelsea and Manchester United. But with over 400 football matches a season now screened live, clashes between top teams are a very familiar sight, and the game, a tactical stalemate, had little of the traditional magic of the FA Cup.
He's still there, no, he's not there, it was Bridge. The matters to the Queen with the FA Cup.
50 years ago, in 1957, the Wembley final between Manchester United and Aston Villa was one of only 2 matches to be screened live all season, and the game was a far more dramatic and controversial event.
The FA Cup final was the game of the season.
It will become infamous for a shocking challenge on United goalkeeper Ray Wood.
I mean, that sort of challenge now, he'd have been, well, first the game would have been stopped, he'd have been sent off, he would have been absolutely heckled all the way off the pitch.
And that was a fair charge, but unfortunately their heads have collided.
But it was also a game of powerful goal scoring. The cup-winning heroes that day were players from another football era.
So, Dugdale with the free kick.
But how do they compare with today's breed of superstar footballers? How did they pass the ball? Were they as skillful? How hard did they tackle?
The art of tackling from some of these boys then was great. They made great tackles from the back and took the ball off you.
To find out how English football has really changed, this film conducts a unique experiment using the latest football technology to compare every aspect of these 2 cup finals, separated by 50 years. Join us for a game of 2 eras. On May the 4th, 1957, 100,000 fans flocked down Wembley Way to stand together on the famous terraces. It was the sporting event of the year.
There was a special sort of expectancy in those days because they didn't see these great players very often. We were crammed in together, and there was a nice atmosphere about it.
It was the game that not only everybody went to Wembley of the 2 sides, but the rest of the country could see if you'd got a television. Yes, black and white, yeah, but if you'd got a television, you're in business. Because not only could you watch it yourself, but all those neighbours in your street who didn't have a television came to your house to watch it as well.
The 1957 Cup final was never going to be just another game. For the players like the fans who stood on the Wembley terraces, it was the game of their lives.
Atmosphere is absolutely fantastic. You're in the dressing room and all of a sudden someone knocks on the door and says they're singing "Abide with Me," get up to the end of the tunnel, you know. And there's a little bit of a feeling then, oh, this is it, you know, and the old tummy nerves come into it. Few players are charging out to get to the toilet before that. And the fella that played in the FA Cup final, Jimmy Dugdale, our centre-half, was actually sick in the dressing room.
The beginning, before the start, is very, very exciting. Absolutely exciting.
The singing of "Abide with Me" has been part of cup final tradition since 1927. A ticket in 57 cost 10 and 6, about £8 in today's money. 50 years on, "Abide with Me" abides, but tickets at up to £90 a seat certainly aren't going for a song.
And don't forget that when 57, they're standing up, all of them, and you've got 100,000 people there, and you just have a look around quick, and that's it, you know. Just concentrate, you don't fall on your face, you know.
Aston Villa had won the Cup 6 times before, but despite featuring internationals like Jackie Sewell and Peter McParland, they were considered the underdogs. Under manager Matt Busby, Manchester United had already won the league that season, and with promising youngsters like Bobby Charlton and Duncan Edwards, the Busby Babes were clear favourites to lift the cup. The first real differences between 1957 and 2007 is the deployment of the teams. In 2007, both finalists used a flexible 4-3-3 formation. By contrast, the 1957 finalists both adopted a classic 3-2-5 lineup.
You played with two full-backs and the centre-half was the third back. Wingers stayed wide. Wing halves were there to do the donkey work in midfield, pick up the opposing inside forwards, support the wingers and generally support the men up front. Inside forwards were there to create, open up space on the wings, who would then provide the crosses for the centre forward. Centre forwards were there to hold the line, certainly, and they were usually pretty good in the air.
Just a hubbub of conversation at the moment. Any second now it will explode into an ear-splitting roar. Manchester United to kick off.
There's a great moment when Kenneth Wolstenholme says, just before the start, he said, the players are limbering up on the pitch and they're waiting for the signal for the match to begin to be given from the Royal Box.
Waiting for a signal from the Royal Box.
And you're just thinking, well, here am I, sort of watching football in 2007. And, you know, the game starts when, you know, the television producer waves a finger from the halfway lines.
And the 1957 final starts with Manchester United in the white shirts.
In football terms, the power has moved away from the Royal Box and into the television studio.
Television coverage of football in the modern era does more than simply broadcast the match. Dozens of cameras capture every move, and these pictures are used to analyse the way the game is played and how the players perform. Delta Tray are a football statistics company which collects data on everything from tackles made to passes completed.
Stats on the left are the running stats as the match is progressing, so count of possession, corners, shots, fouls, and the green text in the middle is all the events as they happen, which have been logged by our spotters up in the gantry.
Delta Tray are employed by FIFA and UEFA to analyse the performances of teams playing in the World Cup and European Champions League. For this film only, they will apply their technology to the 1957 FA Cup final and compare it to the 2007 final. It's the first time this kind of comparison has been made. The first fact these statistics uncover is that it's not until almost the 4th minute of the 1957 final that the referee awards the game's first free kick.
And the first free kick of the match, a charge in the back by Fouts on McFarlane, a free kick.
However, in 2007, barely 50 seconds are on the clock when the first foul is committed. The boundaries of acceptable physical contact were much looser 50 years ago. This toleration of a more physical type of football was brutally illustrated only 6 minutes into the 1957 final. A clattering challenge left a United player unconscious, and the referee waved play on.
And that was a fair charge, but unfortunately their heads have collided. And both McFarlane and Wood are out. And on come the two trainers racing at a tremendous rate.
Jackie Sewell was in the inside right position on the corner of the penalty area.
Has got to Sewell.
And he clipped the ball in for me, and while the ball was in flight, I had the ball in the back of the net on the far post. I was going to knock it straight back into the far post.
McFarlane.
Unfortunately, I whacked it straight into Ray Wood, who was coming off his line. Ray kept coming towards me as I was following up.
And that was a fair charge, but unfortunately their heads have collided.
I put a shoulder charge in for him, and he pulled away at the last minute, and unfortunately we did bang the sides of the heads together, you know.
It was a fair charge, but unfortunately their heads have collided. And both McParland and Wood are out.
And he was just unfortunate that hit him on the temple, I think. And it's not very, I think you can see stars a bit when it catches you like that.
It's just one of those things that can happen at football. A first shoulder charge, then two heads just collide. And, well, you know what happens when your head hits somebody else's.
The most shocking thing about that challenge is the fact that there's a good 5-6 yards between McParland and Wood. As Wood collects the ball, so McParland obviously carries on and collides with him. He's just, I don't know, maybe he's trying to impose his presence on the keeper, shake him up a bit, but it carries on through and dislocates his jaw. It was described by the commentary team as an accident, and the match was also described as an accident-ridden game, whereas today's games that definitely would have been at least a yellow card.
Wood certainly looks very badly off. He must be extremely badly dazed, and he might well have to go off for a short time.
Shoulder charging was allowed, there's no doubt about that. And therefore, when he went in to shoulder charge Ray Woods, he was in order at that time. He was allowed to do that.
And that's the way it was in those days for the goalkeeper. He was just a sitting target for anybody that was prepared to take the chance.
It looks to me as if someone's going to have to go into goal. Yes, Ray Wood is going off. And a stretcher has been called for.
I think the by and large, the referees decided that to play that way. That very, very few fouls were given against goalkeepers particularly. Whereas now we see the keeper that you can't go near him without there's a foul given. It was entirely different in our day, where the goalkeeper was looked upon as one of the players, as it were.
Any physical contact with goalkeepers has been outlawed in the modern game. These tougher rules have actually helped improve the performance of keepers who thrive on this greater protection. Goalkeepers in 1957 were also far more likely to be seriously injured.
What I thought was hilarious was Kenneth Walsham said, some of the fans are being a little bit silly now, the Manchester United fans are booing. How can they boo? It was a completely legitimate challenge. These type of things go on all the time. I said, well, they might have gone all the time in 1957, but in 2007, simply does not happen. So I think the game has definitely become less physical.
Parland, and rather silly booing from some of the Manchester spectators every time McParland gets the ball.
A goalkeeper would take you on sometimes as you in a shoulder charge. I was hit by a goalkeeper at Chelsea, and he knocked 7 bells out of me when I hit the ground. When I got on my feet again, because I didn't want to let on that he'd done a bit of damage to me, and I was a piece of jelly standing for a moment or two in a cup game. Reg Matthews, an Old England goalkeeper, and he cleared the ball down the field, and then a little whisper as he was going past me said, come back and I'll give you some more, you know. So the goalkeepers, they took a little bit of pride in themselves that they would, if you made a problem for them and you come in the ways that you're going to be shoulder charging, they would give you a belt back, you know, with a shoulder, and it was all part of the game then.
And here comes the stretcher for Ray Wood. Well, this really is a tragedy. After 6 minutes play, Ray Wood carried off on a stretcher after that collision with McParland.
Keepers like Ray Wood could not rely on the expert medical assistants waiting on the sidelines like in the modern game.
No disrespect to anybody, you saw how Ray Woods was treated, and that fellow was knocked out, and you saw how he'd pick his neck, you know, in and around his neck and pick him up there. Goodness me, that would never happen now. So there have been players that you go back to the 50s that lost a career because at that time the medical expertise simply was not there.
He's clearly unconscious. We don't know whether he's got a head injury, a neck injury, a back injury, or an arm injury. And the trainer comes on with a frankly not so magical sponge at all. The trainer comes on, sort of potters about, clearly has no idea what's going on. And then, when it becomes obvious that Wood isn't going to continue in goal, everybody's reaction is to try to pull this man's goalkeeping jersey off. One, it begs the question as to why even then they didn't have a spare goalkeeping jersey. Clearly the kitman's slightly remiss there, if there was one. And you don't know what could have happened. Look at him when they're trying to pull up his arms. If his arm is broken, which perhaps might have been the best scenario, then it's going to be even more broken once they've roughly manhandled this jersey off him. If he's got a head, back or neck injury, it could permanently disable this poor man for life.
Only a year earlier in the 1956 Cup final, Manchester City goalkeeper Bert Troutman broke his neck in a challenge.
Troutman's down. He's injured. Teammates help Troutman to his feet. He tells the trainer he's all right, but the crowd can see his neck is hurting badly. Over Dave Ewing's head, and Troutman's game as ever. Injured or not, he's determined to pull his weight.
Nowadays, if a player falls, there's immediately someone sprinting out. You know, the physios are as quick now as some of the players were, checking that he hasn't swallowed his tongue. In 1957, you know, the remedy for concussion was to have your face washed and a wee slap of the face.
It was different altogether than it is today, where the people that go on the field of play, or if the player's carried off, and they will immediately have the first-class treatment.
Although Tom Finney didn't play in the 57 Cup final, he was voted Player of the Year that season, and today all professional clubs like Finney's former side Preston North End employ a full-time medical team led by their own doctor. The staff include a physiotherapist who helps rehabilitate injured players at their training ground.
Now you've got him!
It's the backbone of a football club. Players are always getting injured and players are always trying to keep fit or maintain their fitness. I think whereas it used to be a reactive process, now it's a proactive process. We're always treating things and trying to stop things happen. So the magic sponge is gone and reacting to injuries, and now we're trying to stop injuries happen, and preventative rehabilitation is the key now. So what we're doing, we've got a dip there. See where there's like a little hole in the middle? So that's your joint and the medial ligaments along the top there. It's intact. Joe has actually damaged his cartilage, and where in the old days they would have just taken the cartilage out, left the bone-on-bone surfaces and actually wear and tear the bone and get arthritis. Now Joe's actually had it repaired, so he's actually going to lengthen his career and hopefully have less problems than they would have had in the past with such injuries. So it's a great example of how science and sports medicine has improved and has lengthened players' careers now.
We've got the sprint test, Paul. What's that all about then?
You run, you walk, you loop round, and you run again. So it's like the bleep.
Players are also protected from injuries because the tackle from behind has been banned. So if you touch the opposition player, even if you actually win the ball, a free kick is given. This contact was actually encouraged in 1957, and robust challenges were seen as an integral part of the game.
The art of tackling from some of these boys then was great. They made great tackles from the back and took the ball off you, and they made great tackles from the back and knocked it away from you. And there's excellent sort of footage in the cup final where fellas have done that on both sides. Roger Byrne, Bill Folkes and Stan Lynn, Peter Alders and Jimmy Dugdale. They did all those things, and the referee was on the spot watching it, and the fellas played the ball, and they got the referee didn't punish them in any way, shape or form.
Waves play on because Berry has got possession. It's Dugdale who comes across to cut off the danger.
I used to wait till he pulled his foot back, and then when he started to go forward, I used to put my foot there on the ball, and that would stop him, and I'd get the ball and run away.
Fouls do seem to be given from the more rugged challenges, whereas in the 57 final they seem to... The physical aspect of the game is more accepted than this. They want to encourage the flair and the skill players like Ronaldo and Giggs, so they they clamp down on heavier challenges.
Dixon, and that's McFarlane, who's flat out. He's seen to catch the elbow of Fouts in his face. That's how I saw it, Wally, didn't you?
With only 14 minutes on the clock, United took some retribution on McFarlane for his challenge on Wood.
Well, this so far being a real chapter of excellence. Let's hope it doesn't continue.
It wasn't just the level of physical contact that varied. The whole philosophy of how football should be played was radically different. The game was kept simple, and English teams played an uncomplicated and direct long ball game.
Every time I got the ball, I looked for the centre forward and the two wingers.
We wanted to get into the opposition penalty area as early and as quick as possible. We played a lot off the cuff. People knew what to do, they knew how to play, and the managers knew how to get people going, but they didn't bamboozle us with tactics.
In 1957, the first thought was to give the ball to the two wingers to put crosses in for the centre forward.
Left tailor's going down the middle, but it's to Pegg.
When Pegg and Berry got the ball, invariably they ran at the fullback and they weren't always successful. You didn't hear any moans from the crowd when they lost the ball, because they were doing what was expected of them. That's what wingers should do. They should attack their fullbacks and try to beat them. Well, they don't beat them all of the time.
Coleman. Berry.
The game is actually surprisingly quick, mainly that's because the ball's pinging around everywhere, because there's no desire to have any real build-up play. The ball does go end to end, and it gets quite scrappy in midfield. So the midfielders do get through quite a lot of work, and the game is actually very fast and very physical.
Smith.
Now the emphasis has grown progressively, particularly during the 90s, and the influence of some outstanding foreign players in our football. Possession is sort of 11/10ths of the law now, because you know that if you do get the ball away in the Premier League or in the Champions League, you're not going to get it back for a long time. In this game, you saw that there was a casualness about possession. If something was on, you pass your way through and create a scoring chance. If nothing much was on, you didn't hold it. They didn't hold it at the back. They didn't play the ball around. There was not the patience, perhaps, that we see now.
Smith.
And there was a tendency of some players, even Manchester United, to, oh, well, we'll lump the ball up the field and see what happens. Now, of course, that's about the last thing Manchester United would do.
In a way, everyone thinks of the past as being a beautiful country where everyone played this fantastic football, free-flowing football, and it was lovely, intricate passing, and wingers, like Best or whoever, were just sort of, toying with full-backs, and it was magnificent all over the place. But I think actually the possession count would be far higher now in terms of a team actually retaining the ball. I think that's possibly because English teams have become more exposed to European football.
English football in 1957 was still largely isolated from the world. With English clubs still not competing regularly in Europe, the direct tactics of their game had remained largely unquestioned. Not only were there no foreign footballers playing in England, but teams were mostly made up of players from the same local community.
It was my ambition, and I think it was everybody's ambition, certainly most players, to play for their home clubs.
And there it is, there's the first goal by Tom Finney.
The way to sum up the game is that it was, of the working class, by the working class, for the working class, but the one thing it wasn't was a golden passport out of the working class.
I think also what we have to remember is in the late 50s, the professional footballers usually came from the towns and the areas that they lived in. The local boys came into their teams and they lived locally and they didn't have cars in the main and they got the transport, and the supporter sat with him probably on the public transport, on the bus, and then watched him play on the Saturday.
Players in '57 had to worry about their futures after football. This was still the era of the maximum wage, which incredibly limited all players' wages to £15 a week during the season and only £13 in the summer. This top wage was equivalent to about £250 a week, but only 1 in 5 footballers actually received it.
They might be earning slightly more than the people who are watching them, they might be earning slightly less, but they weren't set apart from them in the way that players are now, you know, living in secure estates, you know, essentially on a different planet.
Unlike the star players of today, even England internationals like Tom Finney had to plan for a life after football.
Skilled hands go with the nimble feet of Preston and England winger Tom Finney, his future assured in an engineering business which he shares with his brother.
Whilst he was the greatest footballer in the country, Tom Finney was also building up his plumbing business. And once Tom Finney retired, that's what he did. He became a plumber.
I mean, of course, there's the classic illustrative story. The secretary of the Football League, Alan Hardacre, phoning up for a plumber, and England's outside right turning up on his doorstep in his overalls with his tool bag. Tom Finney.
And this wasn't seen as eccentric. It was seen as preparing for life after football. It was seen as very, very wise, very crafty. It'd give him something to do in the summer, because footballers' wages went down when they weren't playing.
And this was a concern for all footballers in 1957.
Ralph Collins is a steelworker during the week and their captain and right back on Saturdays. Will Harvey, the inside right, is another part-timer. He packs sweets for a living. A safety engineer and Kilmarnock's right half is Johnny Russell. Jimmy Brown on the left and Bob Tyne both have jobs in the motor trade.
With 25 minutes gone, the 10 men of Manchester United are still holding on, with centre-half Jackie Blanchflower in goal.
The Manchester United fans who are starting this tremendous roar. They see their teams lasted out for 25 minutes, not giving the goal away despite the absence of a goalkeeper. So they're beginning to feel very confident, and well, they might be too. Now here's Dixon. McFarlane. Edwards there now at Charlton.
The tactically limited nature of the English game meant it was relatively easy for teams to cancel out an extra man advantage. Not that these limitations were apparent to those who ran the game.
England thought that it was naturally the best country at football. But in fact, the FA's deliberate policy of isolation meant that it had grown up as sort of the village idiot of world football. It didn't realise how much world football had passed the English game by.
Yet the world of English football had only recently been rocked when Hungary became the first foreign team to beat England at Wembley. The technically gifted Hungarians exposed a lack of skill in the national side.
And there is number 5, but he's not the centre half. Now a chance for Hidaguti. It's a goal! They seem to open up a defence just with a little shimmy, a shake of the hips, and the defence just opens wide for them to come through. Simply fantastic. Seaball cutting in the outside left. Back to Pushkas. It's a goal! With the outside left Seaball right over on the right wing. Oh, a lovely goal! 24 minutes, Hungary 3, England 1. Right now, Botchik to take the kick. It's a goal, my goodness! Well, Botchik, it's a goal! So after 52 minutes, England 2, Hungary 5. Pushkas. Hidaguti, it's a goal!
That sort of football was almost like a sort of wake-up call for English football generally. It said, well, we have to sort of deal with players like Hidaguti as a sort of deep-lying striker, and Pushkas and players like that, and this fantastic possession football that they played. Hungary only, they only gave you the ball back when they'd scored, and they were jogging back to the halfway line. So you have a go now, and stop giving it to us so cheaply.
And there is the whistle. It's all over. England 3, Hungary 6.
They didn't know how to play against continentals. If you look at the 1957 Cup final, it's actually quite a similar game to the 1927 Cup final, to almost the 1907 Cup final. Because of this isolation, it hadn't taken in influence from Europe, from South America. So therefore, it was the same as it always was.
The Hungary defeat should have been a watershed in English football, but the '57 Cup final showed that the long ball was still the favoured tactic in the domestic game.
Coleman out to Peck.
With 11 minutes to go before half-time and no substitutes allowed, the Cup final was about to take a dramatic and unbelievable twist.
It's not out of play yet, it's going to be a corner. No, a throw-in. Ray Wood is coming back. Ray Wood is coming back, he's behind the Villa goal. Tremendous cheer from the Manchester contingent. There's Ray Wood.
Who's this forlorn figure staggering on the touchline? It's Ray Wood. They bring him on again. And once more, no one is saying, do you think, Ray, clearly you have lost all kind of mental capacity. Clearly you may die any minute. Do you think perhaps, Ray, the hospital? Do you think perhaps you should see a doctor? Do you think you should not be allowed to continue?
The signal, and on comes Ray Wood. And he's going way over to the far side to outside right.
Unknown to his teammates and the 100,000 fans looking on, Ray Wood had actually broken his cheekbone.
He's carrying with him one of those pads which footballers carry when they've been knocked out, soaked in some ammonia or something like that, some foul-smelling solution anyway.
Manchester United had been forced to reorganise their whole team because of Wood's injury.
Can you imagine if Mourinho had been told, no, you can't bring anyone else on, and you know, Petr Cech has actually got to come back from hospital and go back on and play left wing and hobble around there for the rest of the game, you know, and your best centre half, you know, you've got to stick John Terry in goal. I mean, Jackie Blanchflower played well in goal, and then you've got to stick your best midfielder, you know, Duncan Edwards has then got to go centre half. So you then got Frank Lampard playing centre half. So the game has completely changed, and for me, that spoilt the Cup final.
Well, Wally, do you think there's much chance of us seeing Ray Wood in goal, say, in the second half?
I don't think so, Ken, no. I rather think it was his shoulder that's been probably very badly knocked about by the way he was holding it. But yeah. I think that this long spell in with 10 men has taken a tremendous amount out of them, especially I've been watching young Coleman, and he appears to be about half a yard slow now, and I think this, till 25 minutes they've been without a goalkeeper playing 10 men, has taken an awful toll on their stamina, I'm sure of that.
As the half-time whistle blows, both cup finals are stuck at 0-0.
But the referee has blown his whistle for half-time.
While today's players rehydrate on sports drinks, the half-time break 50 years ago was less health-conscious.
Oh my word, oh my word. At half-time, nearly everybody dashed to the toilet to have a smoke, which they did. I'm sure they were known about it, they knew about it, because nobody said anything, but we did go, I used to go into the toilet and a few others, and smoke till the whistle went again to go out and play.
Few professional footballers in 2007 smoke, and every part of their diet is controlled, unlike 1957.
No, they certainly didn't give us any idea about what we should eat or anything, whereas now it's looked upon as part and parcel of the game.
Today, Finney's former club Preston North End employ a chef specially to prepare meals for its players.
We generally try and keep it all as low fat as possible. Lean meats, use very little oil to cook and what have you, and always make sure before a match day that they're having pasta and rice, and start carbohydrate loading so that they're built up and got enough energy stores for the match really. And apart from that, it's left up to my discretion, plenty of fresh fruit, salad, yogurts and what have you.
Tonight dinner. Oh, I need you. One of his mates for a game program.
The best one that I do is diced chicken, peppers, onions, peas, sweet corn, lots of different vegetables, with a low-fat dressing on it, sweet red pepper dressing, and pasta all together. And the lasagnas are a popular one as an alternative red meat, so it's quite lean. I tend to do that at least once every couple of weeks because they eat a lot of salad, and it's a good way of getting them to eat all the salad because it's quite difficult at the best of times. But yeah, do the similar sort of thing with rice, lots of veg. Try not to cook everything too much because you lose all the nutritional value that's in there when you do that. So just lightly keep things al dente really, and they get the best out of it. So they eat quite a wide range. I've still not got them on fish as much as I'd like to, but if I don't feed them chicken, they won't eat anything else. But yeah, I battle with them and kind of get a bit of a what's this waved at me. If you tell them it's chicken, they'll eat it. It might be a prawn, but you know, it's the best way to get the good stuff into them.
There was little knowledge about sports nutrition in 1957, and the players' diet wasn't much different from the fans.
It was fantastic. There was the beer, there was eat what you want to eat, there was steak and chips.
Plenty of fish and chips.
No, never been told what to eat, what to drink, or anything.
When I first started, your pre-match meal was steak. That's, you know, because I was told that was what you needed to give yourself some strength.
Back at Wembley, Ray Wood stays in the dressing room while the teams take the field for the second half, no doubt hoping their pre-match steak will give them the energy they need to score that first goal.
And so we start the second half. Aston Villa to kick off. No score. Manchester United again with 10 men.
The players kicking off the second half in 2007 don't need the bulk of the 57 diet because the game now is all about agility and fitness. This need for speed is also supported by advances in the boots they wear and the ball they play with. The heavy leather football of 1957 was both harder to control and far less easy to direct when passing or shooting. It retained water, and if it rained, the ball could double in weight.
Of course, the ball was very, well, it was heavy. It had a big lace stitch around it, and we used to put a bladder in and pump it and make this lace straight, and everybody used to say when the player, don't put the lace pointing to me when you kick it. That was a bit one of the jokes of the day.
I mean, I can remember as a winger taking a corner kick on the day that was pouring down and the pitch was extremely heavy. It was extremely difficult to get the ball into the centre. And I think now it's far, they can score goals from, you know, 30 and 40 yards and absolutely fly into the net.
Only 5 minutes into the second half, United winger David Pegg has the game's first real clear chance on goal.
They stand about 2 yards from the ball. Edwards. Out to Pegg.
But the shot with the 1957 leather ball is neither quick nor accurate enough. The 50s ball was kicked around on heavy, mud-soaked pitches unrecognisable by today's standards.
It's very easy for me to say this, but you look at Preston's ground today and it's like a bowling green. I certainly think that the players have it far, far better than what we had in those days. I think the kit, you know, is obviously very, very different than it was in our day. When I look at the boots that we played in and I look at the boots they're playing with now, and the kit generally is, you know, very outdated in present day times. Everything is streamlined and is made for speed, really. And I think the game is very, very good to watch today, and I would certainly say that it's improved.
Another improvement in the modern game is the use of substitutes. In the absence of this advance, Ray Wood, who had continued to receive the wet sponge and smelling salts behind the scenes, amazingly emerged again to play on the wing for United.
Taylor. And Ray Wood is coming back. Ray Wood is coming back. And this time, there he is. Still looks a bit groggy, but not as groggy as he did when he came back in the first half.
This was an extraordinary example of what players of that era might have to endure with no substitutes to call on.
Great cheer for Ray Wood doing a spot of Stanley Matthews on that far right wing.
This flash of skill from Ray Wood seems unremarkable to modern eyes, but was quite a rare display for 1957. Even the average Premiership player has an impressive ability to control the ball compared with the players 50 years ago. And the stars of this year's Cup final have a skill level which has significantly improved the game as a spectacle.
Well, I think Ronaldo is an outstanding player and he's good to watch. All spectators want to see him play because he's so much ball control and tricks on the ball. And he's a very, very good player for the team. I mean, they can rely on him and probably expect, the spectators expect probably far more than what he does in certain games.
The reason for this massive skills gap is down to differences in training. At Preston North End, manager Paul Simpson ensures that all his squad, not just the star players, have excellent control of the ball through daily practice.
You're trying to put on situations that are game related and as close to match practice as you can and getting them practicing, and we do it in a small sided area, so it's quite intense. I have to be honest, I don't really know how they did train in the days gone by, but this is what we try to do. Good. You need to be able to be technically able to deal with a football at pace when you're under pressure, so we try to do skilled technique stuff every day so that it just becomes repetitive and it becomes a natural habit to them. And I think you can see that the technique is there. We put little forfeits onto them for it so that if they do mess up, they've got to do a couple of press-ups, so it makes everybody concentrate a little bit harder, and it's an important part of the game.
On your toes again. Same thing, just a half volley, left and right. Little half volley, nice and easy. Concentrate on the ball. You just drop one there, Nudes, two. Legs your service not good.
Don't you get nervous. We've seen what happens when you get nervous. They'll all go inside now, and there's lunch on for them, and we've got physios and masseur in there. If anybody wants a massage, they can go and have that. But tomorrow's a rest day for them, so I would imagine there'll be a few of them who'll just go and have some food and just go home and rest now for a day and a half.
Players in 1957 rarely trained with the ball. Instead, they were put through their paces in a series of basic exercises learnt from the British Army.
It's pretty strenuous being a footballer. There's plenty of work in the gymnasium. Medical science plays its part. Right half Phil Gunter does some leg muscle exercises.
The fitness level's nowhere near as what they are now, because they didn't really, there wasn't a great deal of measurement of fitness. There wasn't the nutrition, there wasn't the recovery period, there was none of that about. I mean, the training was very basic. I became a professional footballer in 1962, only 5 years after the 57 final, so that not a lot had changed. You would go into pre-season training and there would be fellas wearing what they call sweat bags, because the season had ended in the April and didn't start till the September in this. There's a massive 14-week gap. A lot of running. And then, of course, they used to go up and down, they used to run up and down the terracing, up and down the steps. There used to be a lot of that. And I can remember in '62, my first pre-season coming in, I can remember quite a number of professional footballers being sick as they would run and run and run.
Well, after the training had finished, might have been eventually going to a pub. Probably. Yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
This physical training was designed to prepare the players for a tough long ball game, and midway through the second half, a classic piece of direct play led to the deadlock of the '57 final being broken by an unlikely hero.
Anticipation moving to the ball first time, McParland.
The crowd were booing me, so the Manchester United supporters were giving me a little bit of stick.
Now McParland, accompanied again by that silly booing.
And the trainer came over to me and he said, there's only one way to shut them up, he said, to stick the ball in the back of the net.
Now Dixon. McParland, it's a goal by McParland. Minutes of the second half gone.
The Villa fans were jubilant, but for United it was a cruel twist to see the player who had injured Ray Wood celebrating his first goal at Wembley.
Fractions of a second I was thinking, I've scored at Wembley, I've done that, done the thing I wanted to do, and it was that feeling for that second.
Dixon.
Everything was timed right on that particular moment, and I belted the ball in my head. It was an absolutely terrific header that I got, you know, when you look at it.
To the football analysts of today, the goal is another example of possession being lost too easily.
It's a good example because the move initially came from a Man U attack which broke down. It was Tommy Taylor who lost the ball, and the ball goes from full-back to winger across into the middle of the park, back out to the other side of the park, and then the attempts on the cross take place, and one of them successful. So yeah, it's a very good example of how direct the play will be.
Out to Smith. Burn to Whelan. Smith. Once again it's Whelan, and once again it's Smith.
The cross comes in onto McParland. It's actually a very good cross and a very good finish, considering the weight of the balls and the distance he was out for a header of that power. It's actually quite a good finish.
Only 6 minutes later, a goal-mouth scramble gave McParland a chance to double Villa's lead.
Dixon. Post it, goal! McParland has scored again.
I was on the far post. I had a header back into the goal mouth. Johnny Dixon turned on it and smacked it off the crossbar. The ball hit the crossbar, went into the air, and I come back from the far post into the middle of the goal mouth and volleyed it.
The second Villa goal comes again from another breakdown in possession by Man U. Initially they throw the ball out, lose it, regain it, and try and play it through the middle of the park and lose it there, where Villa attack and they push the ball out to the right wing, and the cross comes in. It's not really cleared particularly well. And McParland, on his third attempt, manages to put it in. Balls hit the post, ricochets around a bit just before McParland puts it in.
McParland has scored again.
You know, it struck me after Peter McParland's first goal, he does an unself-conscious little jig, and I thought, here's a man who has never seen himself on television. And celebrations these days are all for the cameras. You know, you can tell these are people who are used to being seen. They realise what they're going to look like on television because they've seen themselves thousands of times before. This man plays in one game in his career, perhaps, that's going to be televised, and it's going to be televised live. How can he ever see himself? There are no video recorders. So, you know, there's that whole sort of self-referential television era where people understand the way it's going to look and the vocabulary and grammar of television. It's refreshingly free of that.
21 minutes The second half gone.
When Didier Drogba puts Chelsea 1-0 up, the cameras are on hand to capture the now familiar ritual of the goal scorer's celebrations.
You might argue, John, the best football of the game. Drogba, Lampard, 1-2. Great return ball from Lampard.
These choreographed routines express the players' sense of their own self-worth and role as superstars. In 1957, there were no overt demonstrations of showmanship by the players, just as there were strikingly few examples of dissent.
And a push in the back by Dixon on Whelan, a free kick to Manchester United.
There tended not to be dissent, there tended not to be petulance. However, in the 57 final, there's a moment where the Aston Villa midfielder, Jackie Seal, has a throw-in given against him, and in one moment, he throws the ball down.
By Dixon, now to Sewell. Throw to Manchester.
And you think, oh, crikey, that's just like 2007, where players feel that they are the kings of the game. So therefore, dissent, arguing, petulance, they're all tolerated, and they're within the football community, they're expected. Jackie Seal's action was almost like a little peek into a future age, and there's a link there between what would happen. That's how football and footballers would go.
We have, in football, gone back a long, long way in terms of respect and manners. That was the thing that made me nostalgic. You know, these were proper men rather than spoiled children.
With the clock running down and United 2-0 behind, Ray Wood is still on the pitch as United push for a goal.
In the middle. Ray Wood's in there too. Taylor. A goal! Taylor has scored! And there's Tommy Taylor, England's centre forward, who really brings Manchester United back into this game. 2 goals to 1 now. And there are 8 minutes left for play, 8 minutes plus any additions for injuries. Now then, Wally Barnes, are they going to pull it out of the bag?
Well, they could well do, because the Villa have suddenly changed their tactics in the last 5 minutes and gone on the defensive.
Ray Wood is going back into goal. Well, that's a great move. He's just taking the jersey. There he is. A tremendous cheer. Jackie Blanchard is going centre half. Duncan Edwards is moving up to left half. And so now we're going to see a grandstand finish, I'm sure. And there's Blanchard brought down. But the referees wave play on because Manchester United were in possession. Now Charlton. A tremendous cheer for Wood, touching the ball the first time since he came back into goal.
Despite Wood's heroics, United have run out of time.
Another look at his watch by this, and the whistle has gone. Villa have won the cup. Villa have won the cup.
And it's McParland who's won the cup for Villa.
It was absolutely marvellous, the feeling that you've won the cup just at that particular moment, where you just throw your arms up in the air and run around jumping on each other.
And they've won the cup for the 7th time, a record in the history of the competition.
Oh, we went berserk. We ran round it. We ran to the crowd. We yelled and yelled and yelled. Flung our arms up and we were absolutely berserk.
Even in the drama of the final whistle, the players' sense of sportsmanship towards their opponents shines through.
Oh, at the end of the game, it's hand to hand. You go to shake every single one of the other side, and they shake your hand.
I had the feeling that I went to Ray Wood, you know, and had a chat to him.
And there the two men in this unfortunate clash, and I'm sure Ray Wood bears him no ill will.
Winning the FA Cup final is still a great achievement for the football stars of today. But the ritual of receiving the cup from the royal family is perhaps not so daunting for players who are already celebrities and millionaires. 50 years ago, the long walk up the steps to meet Her Majesty was a very big deal indeed.
And Manchester United, as great sportsmen, applauding the victorious Villa side. With Matt Busby.
I think that the walk-up is absolutely great, especially if you win, you know. And Villa supporters were nearby there, so they were clapping and...
Her Majesty the Queen with the FA Cup. Sir Stanley Rouse on her left, Arthur Drury on it right, and Johnny Dixon comes to receive the trophy.
You have to shake hands with her, and she wore a pair of gloves, which is not surprising really, but I thought that was pretty funny. And I think she recognised me from the 1954 final, because she turned to a sister and went, that's him.
The 7th Aston Villa captain to receive it. Behind him, Jackie Sewell, who until John Charles was transferred, the most expensive footballer in Britain. And now the victorious Villa players all having a look at that medal they worked so hard for and covered so much.
The 1957 FA Cup final was the final chapter of a forgotten era in English football. It remains the last time Aston Villa won the cup. It was also the last time that United team played together in a major cup final. The following year, 8 of the Busby Babes, including Duncan Edwards, David Pegg and Tommy Taylor, were killed in the Munich air crash. Despite this disaster, English clubs shook off the chains of isolation and began to compete regularly in Europe over the next decade. And it was a Manchester United squad led by Britain's first celebrity footballer, which became the first English team to win the European Cup. A new football era was beginning, leaving behind the lost world of the 1957 Cup final and rapidly moving towards the kind of game on show at Wembley in 2007.
Tempers get way out of control later in the mobster film drama Federal Hill. That's here on BBC Two at 1:30. That's after another chance to catch last week's heroes.
Johnson with the header. Sean Utaka lost out to Carrick. Cristiano Ronaldo. Carrick onside, and it's going to go in, is it? Unbelievable escape for Portsmouth, and it's Portsmouth into the FA Cup semi-final.
Cardiff beat Portsmouth, the FA Cup final, Saturday at 12:40 on BBC One.
High point was standing next to Fatboy Slim on the stage. I really enjoyed the Future headset.
Beating Paramore, seeing Kissy Sell-Out.
Bowls and Vampire Weekend live.
Fatboy Slim was amazing.
Today I'm going to see Justice live.
Pendulum.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the Kooks live.
Raconteurs.
Justice, can't wait for that.
Radio 1's Big Weekend, today on Radio 1.
This is BBC Two, and I don't know, all this talk about the writers' strike making the early episodes of this series of heroes a bit dull seems rubbish to me. It just means we're getting a few more scenes of Peter Petrelli without his top on.
Previously on Heroes.
We find people and we make sure they don't become dangerous. And you yourself wanted to put a bullet in the brain of a man named Siler.
He's no longer a threat, he's dead. I finally took the bait. They caught up with me in Cairo. I'm in.
Find out what you can. I'll find the other paintings myself. I was only given the first.
There's 7 more. What's in the other paintings?
I don't know.
Dios mío, ¿qué he hecho?
Tenemos que irnos. Tenemos que llegar a Estados Unidos. A Nueva York. El médico es el único que nos puede ayudar.
No way.
You might want this, Peter. This here's everything you had on you when we found you. It's all yours. You just have to help us with one little job.
Just tell me what I need to do to get my life back.
You mean this? The box with your identity in it. Sure, it's all yours. As long as you do us one favor, yeah? See, Celtic is taking on AC Milan.
We're talking football, yeah? Soccer. I lost my memory, I'm not an idiot.
The local sports book will be full of cash. After the match, all that money gets put in a lockbox and taken to an armored car.
So you're gonna rob an armored car?
All we're asking is that you get rid of the guards before they call for help. Simple, really.
So if I get you your box, who'll give me mine?
Everyone wins.
Not everybody says. Not everybody says. That cash is mine. That cash is mine. They kill you for it.
What did you say?
Hey? I didn't say a word.
You said you were gonna take the cash.
Are you accusing me of something?
I heard what you said. He said